Okay, this is the second part of chapter 7. I hope you guys are doing great, and let's talk about the theory of demographic transition. So this is another important topic for the AP test, knowing this graph cold. So demographic transition says that a country moves from a subsistence economy. That means it moves from where you're just trying to get every day, trying to get the food, water that you need, a place to sleep, survival mode. So a country's moving from that survival mode to industrialization and increased affluence. When all this happens, when it changes, it undergoes a predictable shift in population growth. So we're going to talk about population and death rate in this and what happens to the size of the total population. So in phase 1, what we have is population's in a steady state. The population size is not changing. It's not changing because the death rate and the birth rate are matching each other. So you're not having anything changing. In this area, phase 1, you have no population change. It's in a steady state. You have high birth rates, you have high death rates, and these are canceling each other out. And this pattern is typical of countries before they begin to modernize. So there's very few countries in the world that are in this state, but this is like at the very beginning of a country when it's in subsistence mode. The life expectancy for adults is short, and they have a hard life, and the infants are dying off really easily because at this time people don't have health care, they have poor sanitation, and lots of families have lots of children to try to support the family, to do work for the family. So death rates are high, and also birth rates are high because the parents want to have children around to help feed the family and also to take care of the parents when the parents get old. So this is called phase 1. For an example, the United States was in phase 1 before the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century, when people are living hand to mouth when they first started the United States. There's very few countries now that are in this phase, however. Okay, let's talk about phase 2. Here you have rapid population growth. So you see the birth rate is still high, but the death rate is a lot lower because people are getting putting into place sanitation techniques for their waste, for their bathroom waste, and for their other types of waste. They're figuring out ways to put it so that you don't have a lot of disease caused by that. They're also getting more health care, so their death rate's going down. They're still having a lot of children, however. So that's phase 2. Families still have large families because it takes a while for people to realize they don't need to have as many children and to support their lifestyle. So it takes a while for the birth rate to go down. India, the country of India, is in this phase right now. They have a lot of children, and less people are dying off. So their population is growing. Phase 3 is when you're getting to the point where you're going to start having stable population growth. This happens when the economy and educational system improves, family income increases, people have fewer children, and the CBR begins to fall. So the death rate is pretty steady. The birth rate is starting to get smaller, and so the population size is still increasing, but the welfare of the people is a lot better. And in the book it says, why do people produce fewer children as their income increases? It says, excuse me, as societies transition from subsistence farming to more complex economic specializations, having large numbers of children may become a financial burden rather than an economic benefit. So as you don't have farms where you can have your children with you and you have to go to work in a factory or in an office, it's hard to have a lot of children because who's going to take care of the children? So that's when people decide to have fewer children. They also have access to birth control, and they have access to education, so they realize that excuse me, they can have less children. And in phase 4, you have a declining population because your birth rate's going way down and your death rate's starting to overcome your birth rate. So your death rate is reducing the amount of people you have in your population. And this is in phase 4, you have people are really, really relatively rich, and you have a lot of ways to make a living. And so, for example, countries like Japan, Britain, Germany, Russia, Italy are in phase 4. Their CBR is well below their CDR. Their birth rate is well below their death rate. You're going to have fewer young people in this phase 4, and you're going to have a lot of elderly people. So it really is a changed kind of society over here in phase 4. So here's the phases written out for you, like I just talked about. So make sure you know each one of these phases. You should memorize these phases and the way the graph looks, and what kind of countries are in each one of these phases. So pause this for a minute and make sure you write this down and have it in your notes, because the graph is important to understand it. You might want to draw the graph yourself in your notes and then put this information on the graph. So pause it as you need to and write this in your notes, because this is definitely going to be on the test. So total fertility rate means how many children a couple will have. And as you see, the lower the income, the higher number of children people have. So we're out here at 2.1, and you have people in really poor countries have lots of children to help them form a stable family where everybody can work and contribute to the family. Family planning. Let's look at what happens when people have education. Before, there was a fertility rate of 6.1, and then when women get high school or college education, it drops way down to 2.0. So if you look at this, the trend for this graph is showing that the more education people have, the less number of children they have. So that's important for that for this graph here. Know that what happens when people have more education on this graph. Here's the 12 most populous. That means having the most people in the world. China is the biggest, India, then the United States. This blue-green color means developing, and the purplish color means developed. So we're a developed country. We have, good education. We have good economic opportunities for people. So these are the two that are really all of us right here are gonna affect what happens to the world in general by how much resources we take. So these guys over here are not using that many resources. We are. So we use a lot more in proportion to how many people we have than these guys over here, and that will affect what's happening to the world. So these are the 3 to watch. So 20% of us, these people in the developed countries like the United States, use more than 50% of the resources on the planet. Very, very important to know. For us in general, it's an important point to know, and it's also important to know for the AP test. So less than 20% of the population uses greater than half the resources on the earth, so it's not very fair. So if you notice, developed countries like the United States, our population is kind of stable, but people in developing countries, their population is really, really increased. The slope of this curve is a lot different than the slope of this curve. Okay, that's the important thing to look at on this curve, on this graph right here. So like we said, the more money you have, the more stuff you're going to use. So Haiti uses a half an acre per person. This is a way of measuring how much resources you use. The United States uses 9 acres per person. So it's crazy how little they use and how much we use. It's really, really not fair. So this is an important equation. You'll need to know this for the AP test as well. These economists like Kaminer, Ehrlich, and Holzern came up with this IPAT equation that says the impact that people have on the environment depends on the population, how much money they have, and how much technology they have. So the impact increases with increased population. So obviously, the more people you have, the more they're going to use of the environmental resources that we have. The more money somebody has, the more they're going to buy stuff, and then that impacts the environment. Technology is kind of like, it could be good, it could increase or it could decrease the impact. Sometimes technology can allow us to use less resources. For example, if you use a computer a lot instead of paper books, then maybe if you look at those two things, maybe using a computer is going to use less resources than a paper book. Like if you use your Kindle a lot, maybe you're using less resources in general than somebody who buys a lot of books at Barnes and Nobles. Okay, so technology can either being richer and using more technology, maybe the technology is actually decreasing your impact on the environment. So they're showing families. Let me see where these people are from. Here's Thailand. Look at all the possessions they own compared to a Japanese family. A lot different amount of resources that the poorer people use than the more affluent people use. So when we talk about impact, we're talking about whether they're local, global, or urban. So local impacts are like the people who live in small, poor countries. They're only mainly going to have local impacts because they just go to the land surrounding their house, and they can go and use the resources there. So if they need firewood, they just chop down all the trees near their place. So they don't have necessarily a big global impact. They just have an impact at where they live. So poor countries have more local impacts. Okay. Big countries like the United States, more industrialized, are going to have global impacts because, for example, you buy a banana, it's not grown in your backyard, it's grown far away in the world, and it has to be shipped to you. So affluent people have global impacts. So urban impacts are, most of the people in the world live in big urban areas, and the urban area can be set up nicely, like say New York City, or it can be set up with a lot of not very well developed, and it might be like Cairo, Egypt, where you just throw your trash on the street. I went there twice, and I was amazed by people just throw stuff in the street. They throw stuff in the local creek. Their sanitation just goes in open ditches. Their toilet water just goes right out in an open ditch, and who knows where it goes. So if you have an urban area that's well planned, then maybe the effect is not that bad. But if you have an urban area that's not well planned, like Cairo, then stuff just gets thrown everywhere, and you have disease and all that kind of stuff, and pollution. So an urban can be either good or bad. So let's look at this little graph. It says more than one half of the world's population is going to live in an urban setting by 2013 because these purple lines are getting bigger and bigger. So they're just saying over time more and more people are going to be living in urban areas, and more than half of us are going to live in an urban area. Here's big cities. Biggest one, 20 largest urban areas. So I didn't realize Tokyo was the biggest because I guess they have a lot of huge high-rises and a lot of people live there. New York is next. Mexico City is huge. So just remember some of these big cities in case they talk about them in the AP test. So we measure how well a country is doing by the gross domestic product, and it's the what's happening with products, how much products you're making, how many services you are producing in a year. And we look at 4 areas for GDP. We look at consumer spending, how much money people are investing, how much the government's spending, and how much we have exporting goods subtracted from imports. So how much overall are you making in goods? So exports minus imports. Sustainability is what we want to work on as environmental stewards for the planet. We want development. We don't mind development. We just want development that's not going to hurt the earth. We want to make sure we maintain our resources in a good way so that our sustainability means we want to improve the standard of life without messing up the environment or hurting it for future generations. That's called sustainability. And we're looking at these things for sustainability. So that's the end of chapter 7. Oh, stop, guys. Sorry. So that's the end of chapter 7. And human population will be a big part of your AP test. So we really need to understand those graphs and be able to really read through those graphs, especially this one here. Make sure you understand the way this graph looks, and also the ones with the pyramid, the inverted pyramid, and the pyramid, and those kinds from the different types of countries. So we'll talk a lot about those in class. For the end of chapter 7, I'd like you guys to do the multiple choice on page 199, 1 and 200. So 1 through 10, page 199 through page 200, 1 through 10. Do all the multiple choice, and then do the FRQs on page 200, which is FRQs 1 and 2 for your homework. And I'll tell you when that's due in class. Okay, thanks guys. Talk to you soon.